Hello and welcome to SAP TechEd 2020. My name is Boris. I work as a product manager for SAP, focusing on the software update manager and on system conversion topics. That's the topic of our session today. We have the latest news for experts on the system conversion. So we expect you to be either already familiar with the system conversion or you had a look at the session DT 101 that covers the 101 on the system conversion. For this session, we have an agenda with 3 sections. We start with the requirements for the system conversion, followed by the preparation, the news on the tools and preparation tools, and last part is on execution of the technical conversion. So the requirements will especially focus the news on SAP S/4HANA 2020. So SAP S/4HANA 2020 is the new product version out this year, obviously, and we have the initial stack, the feature package stack 0 available. On this slide, you see on the right-hand side the numbers. You know I like numbers juggling. Maybe you have seen me at TechEd before. SAP S/4HANA 2020 is comprised of, for example, one software component called S/4 Core 105. It's based on, again, the S/4HANA Foundation 2020 in this case, and which in turn is based on the ABAP Platform 2020, that is the application server. That is using the software component SAP Basis 755. All this is driven, so to say, by the SAP kernel 7.81. By the way, that is a kernel that is not downwards compatible. And of course, SAP S/4HANA runs on HANA database. It is 2.0. It is support package 5, revision 51 or higher. That are the numbers that we have there. Well, the conversion targets that we have, you know, as a source system, we have an ECC system, and the general guidance for a system conversion especially is that we support the latest 2 stable releases. Well, what is a stable release? Well, all the all the available releases are stable, of course, but in this particular sense, we say that a version stable is if feature package 2 or higher is available. Let us have a short look on the release strategy of S/4HANA. That is true for all the product versions that we have. So we have the initial shipment or support package stack 0. Then we follow up with 2 feature package stacks, 1 and 2. And afterwards, only support package stacks are delivered. That's what we call the maintenance line. So that means an SAP S/4HANA product version based on feature package stack 2 is assumed as stable because there are only support package stacks in the future that will not bring new functionality or even simplification items. If we break this down to SAP S/4HANA 2020, you see on the slide, as soon as the feature package stack 2 will be available in the future, we will have the S/4HANA 2020, we have an S/4HANA 1909, and 1809 will no longer be supported for a conversion. Especially take this as a note, it's only relevant for conversion, not for new installation, a new implementation, or the selective data transition. That will be in the future. So currently we have 1809, 1909, and 2020 as valid target release. We have the usual SAP notes that explain the boundary conditions, like the release information note listed here, especially for the feature package stack 00 listed, Foundation, and especially Fiori, and restrictions concerning the SAP HANA database listed here. And this 2020 is covered in DT 100 TechEd session. Something else about S/4HANA 2020 now on this next slide, focusing on the operating system requirements for the application server host. So again, I'm not talking about the host for the HANA database. I'm talking about the application server where the kernel is located. That's important. And you see below those numbers, again, numbers, this time concerning the operating system of the application server. SAP S/4HANA 2020 does support operating system for the application server like Windows 2016, SUSE Linux 15 or Red Hat the number 8, especially for SAP solutions. That's important. That means if before the conversion you detect your ECC system is based on a lower operating system, you will have to cover the operating system update there. But for the time of the conversion as such, we have a special service there. You will use the Software Update Manager 2.0 SP9 for targeting 2020, SP9 or higher, of course. And this tool will allow you for the duration of the system conversion to use a lower version of the operating system listed here. But after the conversion as such, after this technical process, before the S/4HANA system is used by end users, you have to update the operating system, but it does not necessarily have to be before you start the system conversion. This is written in the respective SAP notes. So the first one listed here, the release roadmap for kernel 7.7 and 7.8 especially lists that kernel 7.8.1 is associated or is used for SAP S/4HANA 2020. And the other notes are the operating system specific notes listing the requirements that you see on this screen. But this is the source of truth for those details there. And again, for 2020, let us have a short look on the aspect of the Fiori. Fiori component especially, you know that you can have the front-end server either embedded or in a hub mode. That was the case before, although we already recommended that the Fiori front-end server shall be used embedded as a general recommendation. In case you run the Fiori front-end server as a hub deployment for 2020, this then must run on basis 752. But even more important, a hub deployment for 2020 is not allowed for a front-end server as a hub deployment that will as well serve for a system as part of the classical SAP Business Suite. So no hub deployment in case you would like to run the front-end server together for S/4HANA and for the business server, the business suite system. That is the general recommendation. So we in general recommend to use the central launchpad as a central entry point. That is an approach that we recommend. And you should anyhow consider the rapid activation for Fiori, which, by the way, is only available if you run the front-end server in the embedded mode that we generally recommend. In case you have the hub deployment, you would like to move from hub deployment to the embedded, there is a couple of blogs available already in the SAP community supporting in this move to the embedded deployment of the front-end server. Additional information at TechEd DT267 is available. You see the release notes for Fiori for SAP S/4HANA 2020. And the Fiori deployment options and the strategy. This blog is updated with the latest information, important to know as well. This was the first section. Let us now have a look at the preparation phase and have a look at the news for the checks and the preparation tools there. We start with the maintenance planner that is used to plan the transaction, plan the conversion, and provide the software. You see the new look the maintenance planner has with additional features. Nevertheless, for the conversion planning, there are no news. You see, we still have the tile plan for SAP S/4HANA, which is used. You select the tile and have the usual choice. And for us, you choose the conversion option there. So it's exactly the same dialog sequence that we had before with a slightly adapted color of the UI, you can say. Nevertheless, it's worth to check the new features that the maintenance planner overall is offering. That is quite interesting there. And there is even a video available that explains the new features. There's, for example, the hybrid landscape visualization that is pretty useful. And especially in this hybrid landscape visualization, you see a screenshot there. It's even possible if you have an ERP source system to directly start the conversion planning from there with the context menu. Nevertheless, you will then jump to the usual dialog sequence that you already know and that we have already seen on this screen. these are the news for the maintenance planner as such. Progressing there to the next tool, that is the SAP Readiness Check. Strongly recommended at an early phase of the project. This readiness check is improved step by step. You have already experienced this. There are new features, new functions and checks available. It's improved step by step. We do not really count the numbers there, although for a while we came out with SAP Readiness Check 2.0, but nevertheless, there will be no new numbers there. Still, there is improvements like innovation potential analysis. You see the screenshot. So it's entry, it's a tab on the readiness check to switch to this innovation potential analysis that shall innovate or analyze what the innovations potentials are in your ERP sources. That is already available. Further things that are there or will come soon are the effort ranking for simplification items to give you more guidance what the priorities shall be in your project planning. We have the interface analysis already since a while that is improved step by step. We have a section on the business partner, which of course, you know, is an important area, especially typically activities before the technical conversion to introduce the CVI, the business partner concept. And what we plan or is already available is a check on the financial data quality. Very important because you know that there are more strict checks by the S/4HANA system compared to the checks that we had in the ERP source system. So a small screenshot on this as well that shall illustrate for you where there is investment and activity required to adapt or to get a better quality of data for your financial data in there. That is the list of highlights that we have in this year, and this will be continued, of course, in the following year there. Then we have the Software Update Manager, which is, as you know, the engine for the technical conversion. But even before you start the technical conversion, it's worth to check that there is a specific mode that we call the Prerequisite Check Extended. That is already available with some 2.0 SP8. And the general idea of this, as you already know, is, well, the typical conversion run based on the stack XML provided by the maintenance planner will start. And let's assume you start your first conversion run on the sandbox, and then you will run into issues like there is not sufficient operating system or database level. You will have to work on those issues, and only then you can continue and you run into the next issue, for example, inactive objects. Again, the conversion is blocked. The Software Update Manager tells you no way to proceed. So you have to solve this, and then you proceed, and then you get into the next issue. So it's a situation where you are not really sure, well, what are all the issues coming up now? And you have to solve them one by one, and only by solving the issue you can continue. The good idea is now instead you start the same tool but a different mode. We call this Prerequisite Check Extended, and this uses the stack XML as well. And the benefit of this is, well, you get the same issues, but these are not blockers. You can continue, you can ignore those issues. You can continue to get the complete list of all those issues without solving them. Well, actually, this mode will not allow you to enter the downtime. It will automatically reset the Software Update Manager run, but all those issues are collected in a list. And afterwards, you can work on this as an action item list, and you can work on this in parallel instead of jumping from one issue to the next. That's what we call the Prerequisite Check Extended. And of course, you already know that even if the maintenance planner stops and blocks the conversion planning because there is a not supported business function or an add-on blocking the planning, that the maintenance planner will allow you to exclusively run the Prerequisite Check Extended. So it will provide a specific check stack XML, which will tell the Software Update Manager to start the Prerequisite Check Extended. That's what we have. And I see in the chat someone mentioning, well, we already know this. You have told us in the DT 101. Well, something new that we have, you select this Prerequisite Check Extended in the dialog, and with Software Update Manager 2.0 SP9, there's a new option that allows to even run this check without the HANA target database be available. Only relevant for the case that the source is not yet running on the HANA database, which is possible in this case for the usual normal plain conversion and even for the prerequisite check extended, you have to provide the target HANA database. But now with SP9, it's possible to run this prerequisite check extended without that the HANA target database is already there. Because it may take a while until you have provided this, that's why we are offering this as an additional option for the SAM prerequisite check extended. That is the news we have on this. Well, I told you that the maintenance planner is checking the system, and it's especially checking the system on component level. You may have experienced this already concerning the add-ons. Well, the maintenance planner knows the status of SAP add-ons, whether there is a version available for your conversion target 2020 in this case. But it may be the case that there are add-ons from third-party vendors and there is no version available, and that means there is a blocker for the conversion. That's a severe case, especially if the third-party vendor is not able or not willing to provide an updated version or at least an attribute change package telling the software update manager that this add-on may run on 2020, so you have a full stop. What to do then? For this, we have a new approach, what we call the configuration tool for customer-initiated uninstallation. Again, it's only for this specific case where there's no way that the third-party vendor provides an update for you. So now you can consider to uninstall the add-on. What's this? Well, again, the scenario, there's a third-party add-on blocking the conversion. It's no longer supported by the vendor, or the vendor is no longer there. That's really a hard situation. And the approach is that you can use a configuration tool that checks whether it's possible to uninstall the add-on. There are specific boundaries for this. For example, no modifications by the add-on are required. So that's why it's not a generic tool. It's not a generic solution, but it will support you in specific cases nevertheless. So the background is this configuration tool is based on SPAM Saint. And so with SPAM Saint version 75, this is available. Again, the warning, it's not a generic tool and solution for all add-ons. There are specific boundary conditions that are checked by this configuration tool. And nevertheless, although it's checking this tool, the result of the uninstallation may be data loss. So it is an uninstallation on your own responsibility. It's not executed by SAP. SAP is just offering this last solution, so to say, for your project. And you should consider the SAP node listed there that explains you exactly how to use this configuration tool. So the idea is you use this configuration tool in the development system to check whether it's possible to uninstall the add-on. Then you will transport this configuration for the uninstallation, and that will finally be executed then in the productive system, so that the third-party add-on is deleted if possible. That is important to know, and again, you should study the SAP node listed there for details on this approach. That brings us to the third section, execution, news on execution and downtime. Let's have a look on that part. Well, something that you may already have seen is the Technical Downtime Optimization app. Technical Downtime Optimization app aims to help you to meet tight downtime requirements. So this is an offering that we have. It's you see, it's a visual illustration of an existing conversion run. And since you have used the software update manager for a conversion before, as you are an expert, you are experienced with this, you know that the software update manager, at the end of the procedure, at this famous dialog 100% finished, the software update manager will offer you to provide feedback on your experience. And I can strongly recommend you to use this feedback option. At the one hand, we check, the software update manager development team is checking this feedback. On the other hand, with this feedback, you will provide statistics on the run that you have executed, the conversion run. And that's important. This statistics file that is provided with the feedback is this famous UPG-HANA XML document. So an XML document containing all these statistics file. And now, well, you already had the opportunity to check this file on your own. And now the new service that we have, once you provide feedback, this statistics will reach us, SAP. We have an internal database. And now the new offering is that we offer that you can have access to those statistics, and you can get those statistics displayed in this specific manner with this color and indication focusing on uptime, on downtime, on specific phases. So it's a more colorful illustration of this statistics file. And the general idea of this technical downtime optimization app is to even recommend what to tune, where to put focus on to get less downtime for you. So it is about analytics that are based on this UPG-HANA file. And we are working on providing simulation on the statistics that we received from other projects. You can imagine the more feedback we get, the broader our database is, and the better we can simulate and provide feedback on your specific conversion run. That's the idea. And the team is working on providing specific advice for you based on the statistics. For example, in case migration is part of your conversion run, maybe to tune the number of R3 loads, or to consider one of our approaches to reduce the downtime for the conversion. That's the general idea. That service is offered without additional fees, so it's part of the standard SAP support offering, no extra fees for this. And you find this in the Launchpad. You can configure to find the Technical Downtime Optimization app in the Launchpad. And you can see there is an SAP node listed there explaining how to use this one. Now, I told you these statistics are based on the UPG-HANA and based on your feedback. We have, meanwhile, improved this app, and it's even possible, without that you have provided feedback, that you can use an upload button to upload your UPG-HANA XML document so that it will be analyzed and we will provide feedback on this. Now, as you are an expert, you know exactly the UPG-HANA is only part of the whole story. It only contains the data of the software update manager run, but the actual conversion and the downtime contains more than just the software update manager. We have the financial data conversion as well, that in the standard approach is executed by IMG activities. So for this part of the downtime, we have a statistics file as well called Apple-HANA. This Apple-HANA, so application data containing there, can be generated and can be uploaded as well, so that with this Technical Downtime Optimization app, you will get the complete picture of the complete downtime. That's important to note. And again, this is rather a new offering, and it will be improved step by step, like the SAP Readiness check is improved step by step. So you should frequently check this app and get the latest news in there. In the TechEd session DT103, I will have this app focused as well. Concerning the conversion approach, you know that the conversion approach as such is sometimes called as an in-place procedure. In place from the perspective of the application server. If the source system is not yet running on HANA database, then the HANA database will be provided and the software update manager will execute the migration from the source to the HANA database. So the database host may be changed, but the application server host is not changed in the standard conversion run. Let us assume that your source system is not yet on HANA database, so migration is part of the game. The software update manager will use DMO, so the database migration option. Then there is an option to move the complete system. We call this DMO with system move. You see on this illustration that on the left-hand side, we have the source landscape with the application server level and the source database, which is non-HANA in this case. And on the right-hand side, we have the target landscape with an additional application server as well, and it hosting the HANA database. The general idea of DMO with system move is to migrate, to convert, and to move the complete system. So the idea of this is to move the complete SAP software system. For example, you would like to use the downtime for the conversion of your productive system to move to different hardware. First bullet point. Or you may have the idea to use this approach to move your system across data centers from one data center to another data center. By the way, the plain DMO is stated in the SAP note is not supported for a data center move. Even, let's have a look at the third bullet point. It allows migration to cloud. Well, let's be careful. Cloud in the sense of infrastructure as a service. It's still the SAP S/4HANA on-premise edition that we are talking about, but you may have run this version running at a hyperscaler, for example. And this approach, DMO with system move, allows the move from your ECC on-premise system in your data center to a hyperscaler. Again, if the source is not yet running on HANA database. Now, it's important to mention there are two different modes. You've seen the illustration. There is a serial mode. We start the procedure at the source landscape and continue the procedure at the target. And we have a one-time transfer of the sum directory. That even allows to use this approach if there is no network connectivity. But we strongly recommend you to use the parallel mode. Parallel mode means that we have a continuous transfer from source to target. In the source, the software update manager is exporting data and the target imports takes place. And only then, with the software update manager, the shadow operations building up the shadow repository on the target happen in uptime. So if you use the serial mode, all the shadow operations on the target system happen while the source system is in downtime. That's why you should definitely avoid this. Background for this, you are already aware of this. With S/4HANA 1909 and higher, we have the new approach that the software update manager is creating the shadow repository always on the target HANA database. Also the case for the DMO with system move. And you may have a look at this blog to see details there. How about downtime? We already mentioned downtime. Well, in general, we can say we have three approaches. We have the standard approach, left-hand side for systems with, let's say, less than 5 terabyte. It's very vague, but that would be a rule of thumb. In the middle, you see downtime-optimized conversion. That's an approach that is currently available on request for pilot projects. For a mid-range, let's say between 6 and maybe 20 terabyte source database type. But of course, the financial data records are important as well as they influence the downtime. And for higher systems, we have near zero downtime technology, NZDT, as an SAP service offering. So it's not a tool you can use, it's a service offering for such big systems. We have had several pilot customers already with downtime-optimized conversion. And there is an example listed here where we were able to reduce the technical downtime here to around about 25 hours, including the financial conversion. So with downtime-optimized conversion, it's possible to reduce the downtime, including the financial data conversion. That's why let's have a look at this approach there. We combine this with an overview of the downtime blocks for the standard conversion. You see here the line. The standard conversion starts with uptime processing. In the downtime, we have the technical downtime of the software update manager with migration and conversion, and only afterwards the financial data conversion. Well, there's something in between that we call uptime migration, and this can reduce the downtime as well. You see the migration part in downtime is reduced because we already migrate in uptime. So downtime optimized DMO is capable to reduce the downtime at least partially. So there's a specific benefit. Again, only if the source system is not yet on HANA, only then we have the migration part. But for a more drastic reduction of the downtime, we have the downtime optimized conversion. In there, we move migration, if required, and even conversion to uptime. You see the uptime block there. We have migration and conversion. So we move parts of the downtime to uptime. We even have a delta part here, delta migration. That means end user activities are detected by the system and are then replayed. And we have a drastic reduction of the downtime there. Not migration only, but also conversion is reduced. I will focus on this approach in the DT103 there as well. This is on downtime optimized conversion. Again, downtime optimized conversion currently being piloted. This is available either for a source system on HANA or for a source system non-HANA. Only the approach in the middle, the uptime migration, applies if we have migration, so if the source is not yet on HANA. That was the overview about the news we have for the system conversion. You know, TechEd offers much more on system conversion. That is the overview there. Again, listing DT103, for example, focusing on downtime reduction. You see DT104 on the custom code adaptation and much more. So consider those sessions there as well. And overall, of course, the learning never stops. There are additional offerings that we have with SAP TechEd. Hope you look around there as well. A lot of benefits for you. That was the overview on the latest news. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy SAP TechEd 2020.